Welcome to this week's episode, The Power of the Pause. In this episode, Jeff and Erin break down why the most valuable thing you could do right now might be absolutely nothing, at least for the moment. Why reaction begets chase, what's it really costing your team, and how to turn strategic pause into your biggest competitive advantage.
I don't think people are bad leaders because they rush, but I think that they're operating in a world that honestly trains urgency right now. The pause is a muscle and something that I'm still building, just like going to the gym.
Highly Adaptive is a podcast where staffing and consulting leaders learn to outpace change. Hosted by Jeff Pelliccio and Erin MacKenzie, they'll cut through the noise to bring you practical moves you could use right now to grow, adapt, and lead. How many of you feel like you're consistently playing catch up? Like you're watching what everyone else is doing in the industry and you're scrambling to keep pace. You see a competitor launching something new and suddenly you're meeting in order to try to figure out how you do the same thing, maybe faster. And here's what we've noticed. Reaction begets chase, but pause begets strategic advancement. And so today we're going to break down why the most valuable thing you could do right now might be absolutely nothing, at least for a moment. Get your notebooks ready because this conversation is about to change how you make your next strategic decision.
I love this, Jeff, because this has been a topic of conversation across LinkedIn. And I actually did a LinkedIn post about the power of the pause, which is really why we're chatting about it here, because it's not been something that's honestly come easy for me, as many of probably people that worked on my team before can understand, because, I always like to jump right in and give like, hey, I've got this idea. But I really feel like this is a leadership skill that I've been working on. And because we live in this world that kind of really rewards like speed and like quick decisions, fast pivots, constant movement, we don't ever really think about that pause. So one of the things that I've seen from a challenge is we often never really move slowly enough. And when we don't move slow enough, then we never come across with the clarity to drive actions forward.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I had shared and where we started talking about this is I shared that simple perspective of clarity creates alignment. Alignment creates confidence, and confidence creates better outcomes. So when I posted that, it actually really connected with a lot of people. So we were like, hey, let's do a podcast about this, because I think a lot of leaders like myself feel like if they pause, they might be falling behind at times, when in reality, they're actually building on the foundation to truly move us forward.
It's such a great point. And look, we've seen this movie before, right? I feel like, especially in the staffing industry, where it is able to be successful with such a classic sales model, that when you have disruptors like surges in tech, it causes almost a mania to occur. And so we saw it when, ATSs have been around for a while, but when those ATSs started getting more robust, we saw it. When automation tools became really prolific in our industry, we saw it. It happened again with AI, right? So before the democratization of AI, it was all about workflows and automation and triggerings and you got to have this sequence and that sequence, and it's going to save you all this time and energy, and it'll cure all the problems that you have with your people, right? And we're now having the same exact conversation again with AI. And so I think that companies who are rushing to implement without understanding the problem that they're actually trying to solve is exactly the point of this conversation.
Yeah, because people have that swivel chair mentality right now of, oh my God, someone else over there is doing this, or someone else just bought this, so we need to do it as well. But they never really take that pause to realize hey, is this actually going to help my organization move forward? Where I think they've thought speed gets rewarded instead of really looking at what's that leadership perspective.
Well, especially also in a sales environment, right? Speed and reaction is the thing that gets rewarded, right? It's how quickly you could turn something around. So if this is a systemic problem, let's really classify it as such, then why do we rush and what is the cost of it, right? So maybe something around what drives that chase mentality. How are we sort of falling prey to this repeatedly, like literally repeatedly.
I think that's a social side. I think that like society looks at, like we have societal pressures to move fast. And if everybody else is moving, we need to be moving too, instead of taking that pause and looking at how we could be doing it differently. Because I think that with that fast moving pace of where we're going every single day in business and life and anything that we're doing, pausing can feel like we're doing it wrong. We're not continuously moving. Where movement can kind of be like that form of avoidance, like avoiding the hard work of actually defining the problem to pause and think about going forward.
Here's where I think sort of the problem stems is I think a lot of times the conversation of pausing doesn't necessarily have a complete orientation. So what I mean by that is you're told to slow down, but you're not necessarily told how or why strategically you should shift your train of thought. So instead it's like, listen, we're going too fast. Let's just press pause and really like take a moment. And that's not really the answer here, right? What it is, hey, we need to pause so that we understand what the problem is that we're trying to solve. We need to pause because if we just chase what we think someone else is doing, we're likely going to build it wrong, right?
Correct. Because when we skip that pause, we skip the clarity. And when we skip the clarity, we lose the alignment. And when that happens, nobody can execute. Nobody feels confident. So that's where we come back into this frustration of going months and months behind from where we really were kind of going forward. So yeah, I mean, that totally is kind of the rush and the cost it impacts us.
You know, just to circle back on the previous episode with Travis, where he said that you get the responsibility before clarity, like all of this stuff starts really stitching together. The environment that we're in, the expectations are that you will work through and get it done without the clarity. In this really challenges a lot of that conventional wisdom and says, look, like, you know, just because someone else is doing it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for us. And trying to avoid the rev of the topic of the day and focus more solely and squarely on your environment and the gaps that you're trying to resolve, it really does conflict with like the environment as leaders, as workers, as executives. Like
completely.
It's really quite an interesting topic, this whole like the power of the pause.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm sure you've been in these situations and we've been in these situations before, even probably together, where we've jumped into execution like really, really quickly into something. And then 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, we realize we didn't even agree on what success meant within this project, right? Like you're like, quick, let's go, because that's where we're at. So like in those situations, like we have to also, or we've been in rooms. I mean, how many times have I been on a leadership call where we're trying to like solve the loudest problem within the room, but it's not even the right problem. We haven't even like done the due diligence to look at, okay, this might be the loudest thing we're talking about, but what's actually the root cause? And how do we solve that root cause so we can make sure that the loudest problem is not going to be there anymore? So it's kind of that difference between speed and progress.
Yeah. I mean, it usually results in an awful lot of waste, right?
Completely.
You end up with way too many technologies that either don't communicate with each other or don't stack up properly or underserve, you know, the actual problem that you're trying to remedy. The like, what is it called? Like a whipsaw? Like the whipsawing of the environment? Like
a whipsaw? Wait, is a whipsaw like, is that like the lumberjack things that they used to have like two people?
I don't know. I feel like
I just threw out lumberjack. There's my Canadian coming.
But like this scenario, right? It creates a lot of fatigue, right? You get burnout with your teams because they're exhausted just trying to keep up. And it's like, as soon as you go down a path and you realize that it's like off by a little bit because you didn't plan effectively, you're like, all right, hang on, let's move over to this other thing. And you're constantly chasing the shiny object. And like there is, not only is there like financial costs, but then there's also just like the people burn is just brutal. It's brutal.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're thinking about all the things that if you don't pause, it's going to impact you. Because I love it. Start with the negative. Let's go. So the pause. So
polarize. We need to polarize the group.
Yeah, go. I mean, in some senses, like the pause isn't slowing down. It basically is preventing the wrong kind of momentum. Yeah. So now if we think about this of like, if you took the pause and we normalize it, where do we go from here? Because I don't think people are bad leaders because they rush, but I think that they're operating in a world that honestly trains urgency right now.
Yeah.
I think the pause is a muscle and something that I'm still building, just like going to the gym. And sometimes I forget, just like last Wednesday and Friday, I didn't get to the gym.
Sure.
So it's still something that I think that we have to like build and work on.
I think we've certainly set the proverbial crap table for like, not pausing. But let's talk about sort of like what the benefits are of pausing, right? I know that for me, whether it be from a messaging perspective, an initiative perspective, a strategic perspective, I know that oftentimes if I were to look back at things that didn't work out according to plan, it's often because I didn't have really good consideration of the issue. And so I actually use that as a trigger for myself, right? That if I haven't clearly defined why, right? So as I get into any of my processes, if I haven't clearly defined why I'm doing it, that's a trigger for me to pause and to actually make sure I could define that clearly and that I understand who it's going to impact and why they care, right? So like, why does my team care? Why do my clients care? Why does the community care? Why do I care? Why does my wife care? Right? It's all of those bits. And then I can say with certainty, okay, now that I understand why this is a problem and why I'm trying to solve it, now I can start to more clearly build that bridge to that next space so that way I'm taking into consideration all of those aspects that need to benefit from the change.
Yeah, because once you understand the problem, to your point, then you can start asking yourself, are we solving the right thing?
Yep.
Because you're going to be able to look through that. And then you also can go into the like concept of, do we know what actually success looks like if we do solve the right thing?
Sure.
Which then helps. So now you do have your clarity, your alignment, and your confidence in the fact that you're solving the right thing, which ultimately will drive better outcomes across your entire organization as a leader in communication and everything that you just stated, all the key questions. And I think that it allows us to not move into a sprint, but we're in it for, maybe it's a half marathon, but we're like going through it and we can really kind of map that out because we've taken the time for the first, 2 miles, your problem, go your second couple of miles, solving the right thing, really driving what success looks like. So now you have this clean map of making sure that you're ultimately going to finish the race. It's not a sprint. You're not rushing like we talked about. So you're really pausing to make sure you kind of go through everything, which I think is key.
So one of the things that I'm not great at, I'll be really honest and transparent here, is I'm not great at calendar blocking. Like I find for myself in this particular role that I'm in, I find that I end up in situations where I am being very deliberate and actionable in the moment and in the time and in the space that like it requires me to, but I'm not really good at blocking out time in order to dedicate like that mental resource to the effort. How are you with that?
I put time on my calendar at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, and I don't let anyone block over it. I didn't used to be good. This is where I used to be bad. I let everyone block over my calendar all the time. But in my training of the power of the pause, I've had to really work on that. And it's hard. And I don't know. I think that others don't really look at sometimes your calendar and they just put things on it.
They just drop it in.
They just drop it in. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm busy. And so I used to be in the frame where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I can just, I'll like, cancel my minute to be able to pause and really look at stuff. And now I say, no, I'm sorry, I'm already booked. I can't make this meeting. And so I've started to get much stronger on respecting my calendar because it does help me take that moment to look at what are all the things that are in front of me? What am I actually, let's think about it. And what do I actually have to try to understand the problem. And then I have to really like take that time myself with no one else coming into my brain,
Sure.
and then figuring out, okay, what do we need to work on? Where's the clarity? How do I get through this? So that's been big. And that's a muscle that I've really had to work on because that did not come easy. I'm like, oh, you call me, I'll pick up your call. Let's go. Anything, right?
I feel like I'm good at helping others protect that time, but I feel like I'm not great at protecting the time myself. So I kind of expect that like I will just get it done. And I think that's definitely an area that I should work on. Like that should be like my New Year's resolution. Like I'm going to spend more time, like, exercising that space and like protecting it a bit better. Those are great recommendations. So in those moments where you're sort of creating those breakout sessions for yourself, right? What types of questions do you like to ask in order to help kind of organize your thoughts?
Yeah.
And get a positioning in place?
So I will say, I first like review what is the situation at hand that I'm even trying to look at. And then I try to jot down all of the key things for me of what am I ultimately trying to achieve? What are we doing here? Where are we going? And so it's about kind of making all of my bullets. And I will tell you, with the power of AI, I think that AI is also a great tool for us to also ask ourselves, are we on the right question? Are we on the right track? Or I have a situation. What questions should I be asking myself? Here's what I'm thinking about. What am I missing? And so I really make sure that the prompt is, I want you to think of yourself as an executive in this space. Give it the situation. What should I be asking? So I think this is really where people can leverage AI to also help them on making sure that they're solving for the right things. Here's my tagline here is like, clarity isn't hesitation, it's leadership. So if you take that power to pause, you are not hesitating in giving someone else an answer. You're thinking through this smartly. And it's a leadership skill that you're developing by making sure that you're not missing anything and asking yourself and doing a discovery on yourself and answering the right questions.
It's more measured. It's more measured. And it's almost like those people who, might ramble really fast. Like you have to weed through everything that they fed you and try to figure out where the value is, versus those individuals who maybe like speak a little bit more slower and more deliberately because they're thinking about the next word and how it's going to land and where you're going to go next. So I see where you're going. One of the things that I have found in sort of my evolution and as a leader is I definitely spend a bit more time like creating scheduled moments that allow me to curate what it is that I need in order to make good calls, right? So things that
describe that for me.
Yeah. So like most recently, I was able to develop this framework that really leveraged a handful of pillars with regards to like the world that you're dealing with. And so it basically would look at, what are the most successful areas that you're experiencing at the moment? Like if you were to look at all of your billable clients, like what do you wish that you could clone? What are you like sad that you actually took in, right? Because it's just so painful to actually accomplish. What are the real reasons why you lost things, right? When churn happens, I think that we sometimes spin up a narrative so that way people feel good about the outcome. But be honest, like, why did that go? Did you miss something? Did you not deliver because you weren't really equipped? Did you not ask the right question to make sure there was alignment? Like what actually happened? And then going even a step further, like, looking at how the market is behaving. What is the thing that you're going to push forward because you think the community needs it, or you've identified a specific niche community that needs something?
No, I love this. Like, this is good because you're looking at both the intrinsic and extrinsic like impacts of where you're at for the pause. I'm going to take us back for a second because there's something I'm thinking of everything that you're doing, which really kind of plays into a comment that Rod Smith from Glide had like commented on my one post. And this is where I see you, but you're doing it, you're taking that time. He basically said that like every chess master, so if we're thinking about it from a chess perspective, they take a moment before releasing their piece on a chessboard. And that could be hours. And so what I see you looking at is you're the chess master, but you're like deliberately putting time on your calendar to look at this. And what are all the different impacts, both internal within your corporation and external of what is the environment going to impact before you actually make your next move? And I think that's such a great strategic analysis of kind of where you have to go with the pause. So yeah, no, I love that, Jeff.
So for me, in order to take a more strategic approach to it, I love systems and structures that give me a repeatable process that I can pull from. So making sure that I can schedule this on a regular basis to make sure I understand like what is happening in the market and what we're experiencing at the front line in order to create innovation is really, really important. Otherwise, I do find personally that I tend to chase the shiny thing. I tend to see something that we're not doing and then try to fill that void, as opposed to being the ball and like creating the chase for those around me, right?
Yes.
So one of the things that we started doing recently is going through this like quarterly intake. And what it really looks at are 5 main pillars: your best fit clients, the areas of focus that the industry, the community, your prospects and your clients need, frontline pulse, like who are you competing against and what are the keywords that aren't working anymore? What are some of the wedge words that are opening up doors? Things like most valuable resources, like tactics and approaches that are working really, really well, and areas of friction that we need to resolve. And then that usually, like working through those 4 pillars usually begets like these areas of improvement, these ideas that we should be considering that create more value, the greater perspective as we look at technology, like, and it's in that I can then take all that information and then I can disseminate it around the company. So now we're all feeding.
See, I love that. So that's huge.
Yeah.
And that, I think that is the key thing. I mean, what we get to benefit from is we have an organization that we can share. A chess master that is doing the pause, thinking about their next move, they're only thinking in their brain. It's a power of one, where for us, we get a power of many. So we can have that ability to do that pause, do that, the question audit, have the share it with the rest of your team so you can make these kind of small decisions. Are we on the right track? Is everyone in alignment? Everyone has clarity. So then you can move to where I was at, like, clarity, alignment, confidence, better outcomes, which is just like your 4 pillars. I mean, I love this. And I think that's such an important thing. The fact that you can share it with everyone, I think that's a key element from a leadership perspective with the power of the pause.
So creating almost like a central nervous system, if you will, right? Like if everybody's feeding off of the same data points, now, you're not chasing shiny things. You're building organically and internally. You're creating meaningful value based on the communities that you're serving, not trying to mimic what someone else is doing. To me, it just kind of puts my mental state into a better frame of mind. And then it's easier for me almost to like have clarity around what are the priorities. I can more easily reorganize them to say like, all right, this happens to be a priority right now. Those other 2 things, let's move them down a little bit. And then we can actually deliver things that are needed and wanted.
But you're creating right there is like small pause wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Essentially. So you're creating these small pause wins where you are moving smarter, not slower. And
well, let's talk about sort of like, how do we move, right? So like for me, I've created this framework that allows me to pull in the information from a variety of areas of my company that I can then use as a central point of truth to then work with my team in order to identify innovations, process improvements, things of that nature. But let's talk about how we actually move into a given direction, right? Because you could have all the information that you want. I mean, think of the episode that we did with Mark Hummel. There's all this data that's sitting in ATSs, and it doesn't matter if you don't use it or you don't know how to use it, right? So as we have all this information and insight, how do we decide, to move things forward?
That's a great question. And I think that bringing it back to Mark's data of thinking everything that like Toro does and what they do, I mean, they basically allow you to not waste time months later. They look at the data that you've entered into your system, and which is where I also see this as like the pause. And so as we're progressing forward, I think for organizations that might be feeling pressure, whether they're at the exec standpoint and they're feeling pressure from a board or your leadership team or your own team or different people within your company, going silent doesn't mean that you're not thinking about something, but you're kind of doing these clarity passes so you don't waste all this time months later. And when you slow down, like to your point, where you slow down at the start, it can save you months on the back end. So you're driving now a responsible efforts and stuff moving forward. So you can take all that data and really look at it of how are we progressing forward? How do we look at this? So you're really kind of driving that forward.
I know that one of the things I like to do, I mean, we talked about obviously understanding the why in whatever it is that you're doing so that way you can clearly define like where it is that you're headed. One of the other things I also like to do is I like to ask myself if I am building or if I'm following, right? Am I chasing something? It's okay to chase to an extent, right? You might have something in your world where you're like, oh, like that's a really, really good idea. But even in those moments, I try to make sure that I'm not chasing it, but that I'm rather instead like, how am I improving on that concept? Like, how am I taking the thing that I've found that I think is so innovative and interesting and turning that into something that's even better than what I see in that space? Right. So I try to use it as inspiration, not as the original that I'm trying to copy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I like that. So removing the chase from it, but you're removing the chase, but you're being the chase. You're creating your own possibilities. You're creating your own adventure essentially on this side and answering all the questions that needs to be there. Having that imaginative side of it so you can really kind of get the clarity to move forward. Yeah. I mean, I think that totally makes sense.
So let's move into like making it real, right? So, cause you've got objections, you've got next steps. Like, what about in larger situations, board pressure, team anxiety? Like, let's kind of dig through some of the peripheral elements that need to be addressed or that are certainly influential in going through, taking a moment, bringing people into the conversation, curating information and insights, and, making a positive outcome of it,
Yeah, really kind of looking at when we're going through this of being responsive into different kind of actions and not reactive. When you're looking at it from like when we're really making it real, if we're looking at those objectives, I think we always think in these reactive states. But if we look at this and we take that opportunity to really do the pause, we can respond in a more clear and natural way and take that time versus just throwing everything out there and spitballing on a piece of paper and giving the answers and then reactive instead of proactive, as I know we all are.
Well, I think the days of like throwing the proverbial spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks, I don't think that's where we need to go, right? Like I think that is, I don't know, it was cute at one moment and perhaps functional, but I think today, like you have way too many resources at your fingertips to rely on the spaghetti approach. And the other piece of this that I think too is it pays to be transparent. So like, and the reason why I'm calling out these two things in particular is because I've heard the decisions time and time again that conflict with these two concepts. We have a lot of different associations. We've got a lot of different, help mechanisms that are out there for the industry. And oftentimes, like they've got speakers who will get up there and they'll talk about like the thing that is helping them. Right? It might be a speaker from an organization, might be a speaker from a supplier. But they get up and they'll speak to this one concept. And organizations tend to take the one concept, go back to their office and implement immediately without addressing whether or not it fits. So this can be the latest technology. There's an AI instrument. Oh, we have to have a chatbot here. By the way, there's this sales cold call playbook. Like we need to be able to use this. Everybody needs to be doing these things and following this process. And too often you're trying to sort of carbon copy someone else's strategy that was built for them or by them for their community, and trying to nestle it into a group that does not have the same framework, doesn't have the same technology, doesn't have the same community, and then wonders why it fails, or either fails to launch or fails within a very short period of time. And it's because we're not taking a moment. You're not taking a beat to take the information that you learned and tool it to custom fit your organization.
Correct. Well, that goes back to like when we chatted with like Leanne Courtney, which was around create your own story and don't have the candy cane effect where you get, or candy cane trap where you get stuck into this. And that was exactly whether you're on the floor of looking at new tools, or to your point, I think that's great, where you're listening to a speaker and they're telling you this is what's working for us. Well, that might not be your story. You have to create your own story. You got to get your own clarity. It might be a piece of your story. It might be your story, or it might not be your story at all. But if you're not asking yourself the questions of what is the issues that we're running into, what do we need to look at solving? What is our root cause? And going back to where we were talking about, hey, do your audits, take the time, block your calendar, like doing all those things, you're never going to be able to create your story and you're just taking someone else's. So like your ball analogy, you're chasing the ball, you're not being the ball. And I think that's a huge, huge thing when you do go into these conferences of looking at this. I hear you 100%. I think from like a leadership standpoint, we have to really take that pause, understand the whys of right now, and then figure out what's our next step. But we have to do it and really ask ourselves those questions.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure.
And, I would say this just uniformly. If you ever feel these words coming out of your mouth, if you ever hear yourself say, just tell me what works, then you benefit from this exercise of pausing. All too often, and I understand why, right? But all too often, business leaders will be in a circumstance where they're in a space that they don't know. And instead of making sure that their efforts are measured in accordance with their environment, the entire environment, the entire ecosystem, they tend to get to this point of, well, just tell me what I need to say. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me what I need to put in place. Tell me what our messaging should be. Tell me how the brand should behave. Tell me what software I need. That goes back to Leanne Courtney's thing, right? Like, if you don't have your own story, if you don't know how things are getting implemented, if you don't know what the structure is, then what ends up happening is you lose the value of the brand. You lose who you are in that space, and you end up becoming someone else, which is the very reason, you started your company to be different, right? You brought all these people in around you because they believed in the mission to be different and to serve differently and to do this great thing, not just to be like everybody else. So take that moment, make sure you understand, how does this play out organizationally? How does this play out culturally? How does this play out, obviously from a scalability, but make sure that you're not carbon copying, right? Otherwise the copy is never as good as the original.
Exactly. So true. And I will also say for anyone kind of listening, don't overhaul everything. You don't need to listen to this and be like, oh my God, we have to change everything. But what I would do is I would identify one area where you do know that you might be in that chase. And then where we talked about calendar blocking, block those 90 minutes. It's not solutioning. Just ask yourself questions. Like, what were the problems you're actually solving? What does success look like? What happens if we don't move right now? And then to your point, Jeff, where you socialize with your team, I recommend share that outcome of those questions you're asking with your team so you're not in this alone. I mean, when you're in it alone, you're not building alignment. And so you need to get that alignment across the board. And so what I've seen and experienced is those small pauses will lead to those better decisions. the confidence is going to compound. And over time, you stop chasing the trends and you guys are start setting direction.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, look, here's what we really want to have as the main takeaway, right? The power of the pause isn't about moving slower, but it's about moving smarter. It's the difference between spending energy to catch up and investing energy to get ahead. So this week, identify one area that you're chasing. Name it specifically. Ask yourself the audit questions. Block 90 minutes for strategic thinking and, see if you notice a difference.
Incredibly true. And remember, I'm going to take a word out of your book here because this is a you word, but reaction begets chase. You've said begets a couple of times and I like this. So here we go again, but I will say it again. And remember, reaction begets chase, but the pause begets strategic advancement. So I will say, take the breath, ask the questions, get clear, and then honestly, truly move forward with intention. Be intentional in the direction that you're taking.
Yeah, I agree. So if you found yourself nodding along with this episode, then do us a favor, share it with another leader who needs permission to pause, maybe rethink the way that they're doing things. And if you're working on building more strategic clarity in your organization, we'd also love to hear how it's going and maybe drop us a note on LinkedIn or something.
We'd absolutely love that. Definitely share with us on LinkedIn. Let's get the conversation going. And thank you everyone for listening to Highly Adaptive. We'll see you next week with another conversation about moving from potentially reactive responders to adaptive innovators. We'll see where it goes. But until then, let's make sure you get clear before the chase, because clarity creates alignment creates confidence, and confidence will create better outcomes. So I can't wait to listen and meet with you guys next week.
Awesome. Big thanks to Allied Insight, not just our sponsor, but an industry leader and preferred marketing partner to staffing and consulting businesses nationwide. If your firm is looking for expert-level support that goes beyond the logo, you know where to go, alliedinsight.com. If this episode helped you, share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're there, consider leaving us a review, and when you're ready for more industry insights, articles, case studies, and more, find it on allthingsstaffing.com. This episode was produced and edited by Allied Insight, and the music provided by Home Music Stock. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.